when people are, and this is for the baby boomers coming up into this age group, some of them have pensions, some do not. Some have private savings that they worked on over the years, others do not. So there's a little bit of everything in here, and again, no two are alike.
Exactly. Well, what I typically see is, well, everyone's got Social Security. So when it comes to your income, if you between two people, I'll see about $1,000 per person, and that's on average. You know, someone makes a little more, someone makes a little less, but you're right in there. So about $2,000 a month, and then it'd be interesting to see if it goes up a little bit as the baby boomers really start pushing in. But that's going to be about what you get for Social Security, just depending. And then from there, you'll get a pension. And pensions are up in the air even a little more, and a lot of companies from the baby boomers are no longer giving pensions. And
correct.
We'll see how that shakes out. But if you have your Social Security and your pension, you're doing pretty well. You know, especially if you've got two people in there, and if they each get about $1,000 from a pension, you're looking at a household income of $4,000 a month, which is that's fantastic. I deal with a lot of people who are down to, they have just $800 a month from their Social Security, and that's it. So if you're enjoying that comfortable lifestyle with $4,000 a month, you know, between the two of them, be ecstatic. I would hope to someday enjoy that myself. But as an attorney, I'm not going to get a pension.
Well, nothing stays the same from day to day or year to year. Never has, never will.
And so with that, you know, let's say, for example, you're dealing with somebody who's going into long-term care.
Yes.
You are going to be able to self-pay a lot of the added increases to the care for a long time. And you will actually, with that amount of money per month, you're going to be doing pretty well. And you may actually even be, depending on the way it goes, in a bit of a situation where your household income is going to make it difficult for you to qualify for like a Medicaid, because if you're at $4,000 a month, you're over the income limit that we have set for it. So that could be a little bit of a hiccup, and that there again, it depends on every person. But if you're into how do I pay for something like a nursing home, it's either long-term care insurance, self-pay, and if you run out of money, then you're going to have to qualify for state aid, and it's not going to be Medicare. Medicare doesn't cover it. It has to be Medicaid. And so there again, you can sort of see the bubblings of the big debate we're having in Congress as to how do we fund all these things, because as the baby boomers come in, they're about to push the limits of everything. So and so that being said, what I'm always trying to do is say you have to plan as best you can, knowing that everything is about to change, and it's just trying to figure out what is the best thing that is least likely to change, and then start with that, and then move progressively forward. And that's the strategy I
the thing that is least that you could rely on the most is what you yourself have put aside. In other words, get started on a savings program early in your life. And teach your children, too. They get an allowance per week, and they should be saving something out of that in a bank account to start them out. So they get the habit.
The habits you form early are the habits you keep later. So it's going to be interesting to see, because I have a number of people that are, you know, they have this, and I you know, the donut hole that you always hear, there's always a donut hole, and we have one in this long-term care, and that if you're low income, it's easy. You spend down a little bit of money, and then you qualify for Medicaid, and your long-term care is taken care of. Now, if you're in that, if you have over $100,000 and you're up to around $300,000, you're in a little bit more of a gray area, because you will probably spend down and you won't leave yourself much. But in order to qualify for Medicaid, we have limits and assets that you can keep, and one of them being the home. So you get to keep your home. And now if you're a spouse and you have husband and wife. The spouse gets to stay in the home. You get to keep one car. You get to keep your prepaid funeral expenses, and you get to keep your any other assets up to $109,000. So anything you own, like say for example, you're in that $300,000 range, you can spend down to $109,000, and then you can keep the rest. And this again, it varies year to year, just depending on how the economy goes. But the numbers are about that, and there's a lot of numbers. So if I get it a little bit off, bear in mind that they're close, but that's where you're at. And so then what you say is, well, how do I protect the things that I can protect, and then what happens from there? But if you can take a little bit of ounce of prevention, prevents a pound of pain, I think it is the expression. And if you can do that, then you're going to be able to gradually move through there with a little bit more of a guidance.
Well, because of the constant change in our lives, and it isn't just by the year, it's by the moment, by the hour, by the day, and so on. Everything is changing. That's part of evolution. And people don't understand what evolution means. All it is change, constant change.
Makes sense. Then Darwin knew what he was talking about.
Sure he did. Yeah. Because there isn't anything that you can start out that will stay the same.
And that's why I would say with this long-term care planning, which is what we've been talking about, it's really trying to hit a moving target. Because if you try and plan, it's easy to plan for your death.
Well, is part of it the individual's attitude toward long-term care? Is it something they don't want to face?
I would say yes. That's definitely a part of it.
Well, what's wrong with giving it a different name so it doesn't sound so horrible? Because what's the difference whether you put money in 3 different banks, just for instance, and you call one for long-term care, one for this, one for something else? But sometimes a name can make a big difference because they give you a bad feeling.
Well, a good example of that is the estate tax, or as we like to call it, the death tax. You see the difference in the two?
Either way you can look at it, and you can only go so far with that, and you will run into it.
I know it's difficult for people to talk about. I sit down with and talk about the powers of attorney.
Yes.
We have the healthcare power of attorney, which is a document that is essentially what happens when I'm about to die, who pulls the plug, and that's as simple and as basic as you can say it, and it's kind of morbid to talk about, but it's
not
hard.
really. It depends on the individual's attitude to life and death. What's the difference? So suppose you're the surviving spouse, whether man or woman, and you want to make sure that somebody's going to help to look after you, so you pick one of your children. Maybe you just go eeny, meeny, miny, moe, but you pick the one that you think will be the most responsible. Yes, and they have the power of attorney, so that if you lose your wits, which all of us will do someday, they can take over and keep things moving.
Yeah, and what I usually recommend is look for location. Location is big. You know, if you're laying in a bed somewhere, you don't want to wait for somebody to fly in from Seattle. You know, and I also look for the how do you put it politely? The person who can actually won't fall apart in that moment. And that's it. And it is a bad moment. And I've heard of. Well, I haven't heard of. I've actually sat in front of people who've actually had to make the decision and say, yes, it's time. And you can see the look in their eye when they tell you about it, that it was not an easy decision, and it wasn't something they took lightly, and it was probably the hardest thing they've ever done. And that's the person you need to make that decision. And it is not, I don't wish it upon anyone, but if you're going to do that, you got to pick the right person. And it sometimes it might not even be the person you think, but beyond that, picking the person is actually, once you kind of break it down in your head, that's the easy part. You have to then tell them what you want. Because you could pick me right now. You could say, well, I want Mike to do it, but I have no idea what you want. And yes, I've been picked, but I walk into the room and the doctor says, what does she want? And I say, I don't know, we didn't talk about it. That's the hard part. So you want to sit down and you want to say, I'm picking this person, and they have to actually sign something that says, yes, I accept this designation. And you can then say, well, here's what I want, and you can't think of every contingency, but if you can talk to them and say, this is my general view, you'll do a lot better.
And that sounds very, very good. Well, I think we need one quick break.